Hello and welcome to the podcast made to hopefully make you feel a little bit better about the world and a little bit more connected to the nonprofit world. We are going to be chatting with nonprofit leaders and founders, giving them a platform to share their stories and collaborate with others, because we believe that when we join hands, we can stand that much taller and make the world better. So sit back, plug in, and let's create some good. This is Nonprofit Connect with me, Matt Barnes. Well, hi there, everyone. Welcome to Nonprofit Connect with Matt Barnes. I'm Matt Barnes.
And I'm your co-host, Tiffany Pope.
Oh, now she's getting confident with the co-host title.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wait, how did we introduce the last one? What was the first thing I said? I couldn't remember. And so I tried something different and it sounded funny.
You asked me what you should do, and I said, do something different.
And I
Give
did.
me the credit.
Okay, fine. You get the credit.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
We would be nowhere without Tiff.
Yeah, where would you be?
Nowhere. I just said that. Are you not paying attention to me? I'm right here. I'm right across the table. Why do I sound like Jerry Seinfeld? Which, by the way, it did not get good reviews, but his new movie, Unfrosted, is freaking hilarious. It is wonderful.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's on Netflix. Every comedian's in it, and it is a made-up history of the invention of the Pop-Tart.
What?
And it is so funny. You have to watch
So
it.
random.
It's so good. It's so funny.
Okay, but the best comedian is not in there.
Who's the best comedian?
Me.
Oh my gosh. Wait a minute. I got to find the right one here. There you go. All right. Yeah. Okay. So I was going to tell about this. One thing I do with my kids, my oldest kids who are 6, and I've been doing this for a while just as a kind of an experiment to see at what point they would start having really like deeper conversations with me. And so once a month or so at bedtime, instead of reading a book or something, I'll say, let's do an Ask Me Anything. You guys can ask me anything that you've ever wanted to know. And I started this a few years ago, and it took until like last month before a really deep type question came in. So far,
gosh.
It's just been like the most silly, whatever things. Are dragons real? I mean, I still get these things. So, but last month, Violet, my daughter, said, why are there so many homeless people?
Oh, wow.
And I was like, whoa,
That is a good question.
And it led to this really great conversation about people experiencing homelessness and fairness in the world, and nonprofits that are really focusing on solving these problems and how we can support them. And that's maybe the best way to go about that. And I just thought that was so cool. Like, I got to lead into this conversation that went to a lot of different places with both McCoy and Violet, my 6-year-olds, because she asked that question. And we've done, through Rogue Creatives, we've worked with a lot of organizations that work with people experiencing homelessness and combating the problem of homelessness. So I've learned a lot about that, and I love supporting those people and the work that they're doing. Which leads me into today's guest, actually.
Wow.
See, did you see how that was a seamless transition there?
Yeah, that was so good. That was a good introduction.
So good. All right, we'll be right... No, I'm just kidding. I got to tell you about who it was. Today's guest is Tara Barauskas. She is the executive director at Community Corporation of Santa Monica. Santa Monica, a place I've spent a lot of time because I went to school at Pepperdine, which is up in Malibu, and there's nothing to do in Malibu after 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So you got to go to Santa Monica. So Santa Monica is where we were at all the time. I love that place. I love Santa Monica. And she runs this nonprofit there. They're on a mission to make Santa Monica a more inclusive, caring, environmentally sustainable city. And she's worked with both for-profit and nonprofit sectors and has over 20 years of experience working in affordable housing development. And for most of us, housing is something we take for granted. And for me, even having done a lot of work with nonprofits in this area, there was a lot that was, I don't know, it was kind of a big eye-opener for me. And still, I'm learning so much. And for a lot of our listeners, I think, out there who work with a lot of different communities, no matter what you're focused on, homelessness and people experiencing that is probably touches what you're doing in some way. And so it's just so good to be in on that conversation and know what's going on. So we talked about a lot of things to do with affordable housing, mostly the effects of affordable housing has on the wider community. And there's a lot of stuff there that you just don't think about, I think.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, really insightful. And we will be right back with Tara Barauskas.
Brief message.
I was saying her name still.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intervene.
Oh, my goodness.
She deserves all the credit.
She does.
She does. Okay, do it again.
She was the guest.
Do it again.
All right. We will be right back with Tara Barauskas after this brief message.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Nonprofit Connect with Matt Barnes is brought to you by Rogue Creatives. Did you know that your brand has a personality all of its own? Well, it does. Or it should. But maybe it doesn't. How do you know if it does? Here's what you do. Ask yourself, does the way you describe your organization match the way you describe your branding? Because it really needs to. Why? Because people don't connect with organizations. They just don't. They don't feel connected to them. They feel connected to characters. They feel connected to personality. So it's super important that your brand has a personality that connects with the right people to bring them into your story. And that's what Rogue Creatives is all about. We've developed our very own process called the Strategic Storytelling Framework to define your brand personality and create a brand foundation that will make sure your organization has that main character energy that connects with others and pulls them right into your story. And by the way, it works. And we got the receipts. Our nonprofit clients have seen incredible increases in giving that have allowed them to help even more people and make the world a better place. Get started today by visiting roguecreatives.com/NPC. That's NPC for Nonprofit Connect. You can schedule a free brand consultation and take our free online brand character quiz. And we all know that everybody loves a good online quiz, especially when it's free. So get over there and do that because why not? Why wouldn't you? You love it. It's going to be fun. That's roguecreatives.com/NPC to begin defining your brand character today. There's no commitment or risk for you at all. And honestly, we just can't wait to meet you. We kind of think we could be good friends. I think we could hang out. You could buy us lunch. We can help you with your branding and talk about the shows we're binging or whatever. It'd be nice. Rogue Creatives. Seriously, creative storytelling. All right, on with the show. All right, I'm here with Tara Barauskas from the Community Corporation of Santa Monica. And Tara, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Yeah, this is going to be great. We always start off with a segment we call 3 Random Questions. I've got a list of 100 random questions now, I think, and I have a randomizer that chooses 3.
Uh-oh.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Just to kind of break the ice. Okay. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Wow, that's an interesting question. There's pros and cons of every place, I would say. I've traveled a lot around the world, and I would say that Los Angeles, where I live, is really one of the best places. So I probably would pick Los Angeles.
It is pretty great. It's a pretty good spot there. Some of the traffic.
You can't beat the weather, that's for sure.
You can't beat the weather. Well, this week, not so much, but
Yeah.
And the traffic up there in Santa Monica and Hollywood and all that is not my favorite, but I do love coming up there.
I really do. There's anything you want within 2 hours. Beach and mountains and desert. I mean, it's just, there's no place like it.
Yeah. Oh, I miss getting to go up there more. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Oh, that's an interesting one, too. I mean, I think because of the line of work I'm in, the first thing I thought of is to end homelessness.
Okay. Just wish it and it's done.
Wish it. Everybody has a home to live in.
I love that. That's so good. And last, you have one book you can take on the desert island with you. What's the book?
Oh, you're asking me to choose from all my favorites. Wow. Oh, gosh. And it would depend on the mood that I'm in. I guess one that I read recently that I really liked and I probably would want to reread and take on the desert island is a book called Just Action, which was a follow-up to The Color of Law that was written by Richard Rothstein. And again, I guess I'm a housing nerd because I like to talk about all things housing and think about it. But that follow-up book, Just Action, is really great because it talks about what can you do about things like racial segregation. So I'd probably want to take that and reread it and figure out what I can do.
That's awesome. That's the problem with people who are passionate about what they do. The personal and the professional just kind of collide together. So you're like, yeah, I actually enjoy reading those kind of books. I think somebody maybe who's an accountant isn't excited to read an accounting book, but maybe, I don't know.
You never know.
You never know.
But yeah, I mean, I go on vacation. What do? I look at housing. I think about why there's no homeless people in one place versus another. It just, when you're passionate about your work, it becomes part of who you are.
Right. And LA is such an interesting place for that. I mean, we've done a lot of work with organizations in Orange County that deal with homelessness. LA, I would say more than Orange County even, like where you can be on one street that is giant mansions and literally go one block over and it's the poorest neighborhoods, and the crossover of life that's happening everywhere there is really interesting from a sociological kind of dynamic standpoint of how do these things coexist and how do they work together? What was it that drew you specifically in Santa Monica Well, let's go back. What's your origin story? How did you start out and how did you end up where you're at?
Yeah, so I was going to college and I did not know what to do with my life. So let's just suffice it to say I was a bit of a train wreck. I was just kind of all over the place trying to figure out my life and really didn't have a clue. I changed my major 3 times, moved around. And so I said, I got to stop messing around here. I'm going to start working and go to school part-time because I needed, to support myself. And I just ran into a job online for an affordable housing entry-level position just randomly. And I said, well, let me try for that. And I ended up getting the position and learned basically from the ground up. And I'll never forget what really kind of clinched it for me was the first time I went to see one of the buildings, and it was a building in Chula Vista near San Diego. And I'd been doing sort of admin support work for the development department that was building the affordable housing and running numbers and looking at papers. But the minute I saw the building and I connected it to what I was doing, I was hooked. That was it. And that was in 1999. So it's been almost 25 years now that I've been in this work. And I just learned from the ground up and just became completely obsessed with it.
And what an area to focus on. So many areas of nonprofit work and the ways people are fighting to change the world for the better are difficult. And otherwise, I guess if they weren't, then we wouldn't need the nonprofits to address them. But homelessness in particular has become so politicized unnecessarily. And there's so many mistruths, straight up lies, and just misunderstandings of it out there. What has been the biggest challenge as far as communicating to the public?
Well, in our line of work, we do a lot of community outreach, and our organization, Community Corp, is not focused specifically on homelessness, but we are focused on housing. So we do house people from all circumstances, some who have been homeless, some who just are struggling financially or have disabilities, basically anybody who wants. And it is a really difficult conversation. Over the years, I've tried to learn how to work with the community better. And I've learned that the best way to work with them is to, first of all, listen. So we've kind of rearranged our format for our community meetings to be about 10, 15 minutes of presentation and an hour of listening and answering questions. And we've just found that that's really what needs to happen. I've also found that if you break it into smaller groups and sit down and look in somebody's eyes and really hear what they're saying and really try to answer in a kind of more calm way, that really works well too. I think what communities crave is authenticity when you're in kind of a community workshop setting. And when a developer just kind of gets up and says, I'm putting this building here and yeah, I'm going to listen to you. And then they don't, or they're not being authentic about really trying to take input or answer questions, then it's obviously really upsetting and understandably so. We've sort of over the years heard a lot of the same recurring questions and themes about low-income people, but also people who have been homeless. And so certainly we have our roster of answers at the ready. So I mean, we could dive into any of those specifically, but, my job is to try to educate and offer facts and information for people so that they understand. One thing that's been really effective actually came post-pandemic. I was working on a building and the community meetings were quite contentious. And somebody said, I don't want janitors and barbers living next to me. And I said, first of all, every profession has integrity and is needed. But I said, can we talk for a second about grocery store workers and bus drivers who are all making lower wages? But we could all say, and we all have said, that they are heroes that worked despite great risk to themselves, no additional pay or anything like that. So I said, how could you say you wouldn't want that person to be able to live in this community and not drive 2 hours to their job? So when people start putting 2 and 2 together, it gets through to some people. I will say there's some people it'll never get through to, but I go for how many can we help understand?
You have to be an optimist in nonprofit work. Otherwise, you would just be constantly depressed, I think, if you focus on all the people that you can't get through to, because there's so much for people to be aware of and learn about, and there's only so much that you can do. The housing market obviously has changed over the years. You guys have been doing this for a very long time. What are some of the things that you've seen that have changed in your approach to things over the years that have maybe either made it more effective or just had to change because of the times?
Well, I can certainly speak about Community Corp's work, but also kind of what I see in the housing ecosystem in LA. And certainly things have changed. I will say that just because somebody gets an affordable unit, an affordable apartment, it doesn't mean that their needs are any different than anyone else. One of the things that drives me nuts is some of the policymaking going around no parking for affordable housing. And look, from a climate change perspective, I get it. We want everyone to be taking transit or walking to their jobs, but that's not the reality. And I actually think it's a little bit upsetting to insinuate that just because somebody's low income doesn't mean they don't need a car and don't deserve on-site parking that's easy and safe and convenient. So yes, it does come with a cost, but that's certainly one of the things that people have been really pushing to eliminate parking for affordable housing. And I say no to that because I want our residents to live like anybody else and have the conveniences everybody else has. So to really kind of fight for that is, I think, something that I'm committed to. The other sort of misnomer is that having kind of teeny spaces because we're trying to be cost efficient is a good strategy and more housing, more better. That's not what I subscribe to. I think if we're building housing, it's for the long term. And it should be treated as a home for someone. So, for example, I remember talking to someone, this was not one of my buildings, but at my last job, who said, well, I don't want to live in a building where there's a communal kitchen and I have to share the kitchen with everyone else because people take my food. I don't want to live in a studio where I can't have my family over and have a proper meal. So back in the day, I think when we were first building affordable housing as a community, we would just try to kind of build as many units as possible, convert SRO hotels where the bathroom and kitchen's down the hall. But that's not really how, at least nowadays, people want to live. They want to entertain their family. They want to have spaces where they can have potlucks or have fitness classes. One thing that I think in Santa Monica, especially being sort of an eco-friendly and sustainable community, is people are really into fitness and they're also into gardens. So some of the ways that we're evolving is to address those things. So providing more garden programming is really great, not only from a sustainability standpoint, but a fresh food access standpoint, and most of all, community building. People come in and they're building a garden together and digging their hands in the soil, and it's just complete magic. So those are some of the ways we're kind of thinking how people want to live. And to me, this is about well-being, right? It's not about let's just stick them in four walls and a roof. We want to create well-being for someone's life.
Well, you want to set them up for success.
Absolutely.
If you put them in a space and if it's a miserable space, I mean, that's not really setting them up for a great future. Do you feel like some of the restrictions, the parking and the things that people fight against on those, I mean, I feel like, and maybe this is just me, it feels like sometimes they're practical issues or they're kind of couched that way when it's really kind of about othering. It's sort of about like, well, they don't need that. Or it's that way to sort of other people instead of going, yeah, let's give them everything they need. They're people just like us. They're people like me. I could be. Do you feel like that plays into it?
I don't know if it's so much that. I think that there's pressures and it's understandable. So people are really focused on cost. I have gotten kind of a lot of questions and pushback from communities about the cost of building affordable housing, especially because it's taxpayer dollars. And we certainly feel that responsibility. So I don't think it's coming from a place of, well, I hope it's not, of being sort of thinking they get something else. They don't need as much somehow. I think it's more just this over fixation on cost to the detriment of the long-term good and well-being. So saying, oh, we've got to find every way possible to bring down costs. Yes, I do think we need to bring down costs, but eliminating parking, for example, or some other amenity, or just squeezing as many small units in, I just don't think that's the right strategy. I think there are other strategies that should be pursued. So yeah, that's kind of my thought, is that I think our housing should be as good or better than the market rate housing, and that's to promote dignity for everybody.
Yeah, that's great. I want to shift a little bit. So the main sort of audience for this podcast is people in the nonprofit sector. And what strikes me as you're talking, and I think in this particular area, the people that I've met in particular, like whether it's affordable housing, it's dealing with homelessness, you know your stuff. You do the research and you read the books. You're able to respond to some of the misunderstandings or the politicization with facts and with the reality of what it needs to be. Can you just talk a little bit about that role in your job and how you go about staying on top of all of that so that you can be effective? Because I think that can apply to any area of nonprofit work or any work at all, actually. How do you see that as part of your job and how do you go about it?
Absolutely. And it's a real challenge, I will say, because there's so much, especially in LA, to keep up with, right? The political scene, policy scene, what's happening at the state, housing things that are going on. Yes, I think it's important to try to stay up with all of those things. And more importantly, hear what's happening in the community. So I think one thing that works for us is to be a little more intentional about which geographic areas we're working in, because then that kind of limits the amount of things we need to keep track of, whether it's city council meetings, planning commission, what's going on with the housing element or whatnot. The more areas you work, the more things you need to keep up with. So I think that's one strategy that could work. We do try to keep like files of, okay, these are all the reports that talk about property values not going down, and you keep it for everybody to use because ideally no one person can know everything, right? So we try to kind of keep building our arsenal of knowledge and sharing it with our staff so that everybody is equipped with that information and disseminate it out.
Yeah. Because, yeah, it seems like in an industry and an area that is politicized, there is misinformation out there. Having the answers in your tool belt ready to go is so important to be able to help people see, no, that's actually not true. What's true is this. And some of those statistics and all of that. What do you feel like has been your biggest challenge in the work that you do?
Well, I would say there's definitely more joys than challenges, or I wouldn't still be doing this. But right now, nonprofits, and probably everyone listening here would agree, nonprofits are really struggling post-pandemic, and organization is no different. There's been a lot of consequences to the pandemic that have really been hard on us. So we're all trying to focus on how do we come out of that. And that's a challenge. And sometimes you have to make priorities. And you, as nonprofits, we're passionate, right? We want to do everything. I want to do this and that and that. And sometimes what's hardest is to have to say no to something. So that's definitely challenging. I think the rhetoric out in the communities, specifically about the people that we serve, is always really tough. It's always been really tough. And it continues to be one of the areas that's hardest for me. Just kind of emotionally, I had to learn how to regulate my emotions when people say things like, I don't want janitors and barbers living next to me, or those people are criminals, put them in the desert, because I've heard that one a lot of times too. It's really hard to not react to that, but you have to. You have to kind of just grin and bear it and take it, but also process it and learn how to respond to that. And sometimes it's not successful and sometimes it is. And then the other part of that, because I do a lot of the community work, is when I present facts, many people ask about property values going down, and I share with them Harvard and different universities that have studied this. And when they still walk away not taking in that fact or not being willing to accept it, that's maddening.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And I'm sure everyone's got something like that where people don't want to accept evidence because they don't want to hear it.
Right. They don't want to change their belief or their way. I don't think many people would argue with the fact that I think we've got a critical thinking problem in society right now. People are oftentimes more comfortable just keeping their beliefs where they are instead of kind of processing the information and making changes. And that is in the work that we do with nonprofits as doing marketing and storytelling. It has been maddening at times where you're like, no, but that's not right. And I used to think that way too. And then I learned this and now I know that. And I love being able to sort of lead through that perspective because there are so many things. I grew up here. I live here. There are things that I believed or had been told and then I've learned and I can bring people along. But it is maddening sometimes when people are just like, no, I don't want to know that.
Right. And I think social media has really been detrimental in many ways, and particularly next door, at least in this area. I call it the toxic stew because that's where this kind of misinformation festers. So we've actually been thinking of a strategy around, okay, let's go in there, right? Because one of the things I think as nonprofits, as advocates for social justice, is that we have to recognize where we are and just attack it at the source. So instead of this kind of echo chamber mentality that is really comfortable for us to speak to people we already know are supportive, it's like, no, we got to go in the toxic stew and try to reach at least some of the reasonable people there and try to explain things. So Social media is definitely very challenging, but I think we have to keep working at it.
Yeah. Going back to the things that make your blood boil when people say things, I mean, we all have those areas, those things, especially the more passionate you are about something, the more it's difficult. What are some of the practical ways that you have been able to process that or get to a place where you don't let that trigger you? Are there any practical tips you can give?
Sure. Well, if people are at community meetings where they're taking in feedback of any kind, whether it's housing or something else, one strategy I found to be pretty effective is when people say things like some of the things I've mentioned, you write it on the board, write it on your whiteboard or Post-its and let people look at it. It embarrasses them when they see it like that. Sometimes even saying it back to them, I just want to understand, you're saying that everyone who is low income should live in the desert? And then they kind of retreat. Another effective strategy is having other neighborhood people do some of the fight for you, and certainly somebody who's an advocate. But one thing I've seen turn the tide of negativity is when a person who lives down the street from someone else say, you know what, I'm okay with this, and this is why. So sometimes it shouldn't just come from me. It can come from somebody else who is a believer in the neighborhood, and that gives them sort of that credibility. It isn't easy. It's definitely something you learn over time. Things like taking deep breaths, like when you're not reacting. I actually learned this from someone else, like pause, take a deep breath because your instinct might be just to kind of lash back at something you hear that you don't like. And then lots of stress management. I mean, I'm sure nonprofits know all about this. I've certainly incorporated meditation and yoga into my lifestyle to manage my stress so that I can really be present and be able to deal with those things.
That's great. It's not great that you have to do that. It's not great that any of us have to do that. But well, the more we can lean into some of these tools that we have and be able to process or work through our feelings on them, the more we can be effective. I think there's that balance of you don't want to get dispassionate, but you also need to be able to keep it under control and use it for good. And it sounds like you guys are doing that and changing Santa Monica. What has changed in Santa Monica? What are some of the things that you guys have done that you're most proud of and excited about?
Well, Community Corp's been around 41 years, so certainly we've had lots of time to do good work there. We have 95 buildings. So that really surprises people when they hear there's that much affordable housing in Santa Monica. And I said, yes, absolutely. We have over 2,000 apartments for lower income households. So I'm super proud of that. And in particular, had this as my career for almost 25 years now. The specific focus on putting lower income housing in high opportunity neighborhoods is what we call them, is a magical formula and super important because when you look bigger pictures, what do we want our community to look like? What do we want Los Angeles to look like? Do we want it to be a segregated society? Absolutely not. And certainly Santa Monica was a community that could have been on that trajectory because it's a coastal community, quite affluent, and it could have easily just become a rich white enclave. And I think kudos to leaders in Santa Monica and groups like Community Corp and other nonprofits who really did the work to say, no, that's not what we want here. So I take a lot of pride in what we do, and I want to make sure every building is an ambassador of our work. So we work with designers who are mission-oriented and also create beautiful buildings so that when I drive by, I say, now that is an asset to this block or to this community. But it's not only in the design, it's in the consistency over the long term. So that's one thing I can tell the community is we are here for the long term. We've been here 40 years. Hopefully we'll be here another 100 years in your community, keeping up with our buildings, making sure they look good so they continue to be that ambassador of the community. And also our residents. I think one thing that I'm really excited about is that we have programs that help our residents connect not only with each other, but to the community. So we have a resident council where people can learn, for example, how to advocate for affordable housing. And in fact, they've gone to city council meetings and other things to speak in support of affordable housing or to share their stories. So that work is work that I think we all need to continue to do as nonprofits is to share the success stories from the people experiencing the success because it's really powerful.
That's awesome. All right, you're impressive. This is great. This is my favorite part of doing this podcast is just I get to meet people who are doing amazing things all over the place that I don't get to hear about normally and get to share that with other people. And the world suck sometimes and we're bombarded with bad news all the time. So it's nice to hear like people out there doing good. And I went to Pepperdine, so I spent a lot of time in Santa Monica in college, and a place that I love. And so, man, it's heartwarming to know that you're doing that work there and changing lives and changing that community. It's wonderful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you because I think it does help people when they know that there's good things happening in the world. So lifting up those stories, I think, is wonderful. And I appreciate that you do that. But yeah, I call it the antidote to toxicity. There's a lot of negative stuff out there, but there's also a lot of positive stuff, and it doesn't get enough airtime or press. So that's what you're doing. And I think that's great.
Yeah, it's fun. It's become that's the thing I look forward to every week, interviewing people like you. Few closing questions that we always want to check in on. What makes you feel the most connected to your community?
I think really being there and talking to people, for sure. There's lots of different ways you can connect. I think connecting over shared ideals is something that I'm really passionate about. So I do a lot of volunteer work with other social justice groups like Committee for Racial Justice. And I think what I like about that is I get to meet different people and learn from them. That makes me feel both part of the community, but also that I'm working on my own evolution, right, as a person and trying to be better. And really meeting people where they're at, I think, is important. So not just kind of reading stuff online, but actually just going out in the community and walking with people or going to a garden to do some digging in the soil. I think we all got away from that during the pandemic, and it was really hard and isolating in many ways. So I think we all need to be doing a lot more FaceTime stuff. So that's what makes me feel good. Giving someone a hug, smiling in person, sharing a meal together, all these things that make us connected.
Yeah. What do you think the nonprofit world could do to be more connected?
Well, I think being able to share information is really helpful. In the affordable housing space, there's a little ecosystem of us nonprofits here in the LA area, probably 20, 30. Most of us know each other for many years and admire each other's work. And what's really great is that we can talk to each other pretty honestly, like, ooh, this thing is a struggle for me. Like, what are you doing about that? Right now, insurance is a really difficult subject in California. So we're all asking each other, well, how do we deal with premiums going up 300%? And I think the more that we can be not afraid to talk about our challenges and to share strategies or success stories, I think that's a really great way to connect and to build our own strength.
That's great. And lastly, what is the thing in your job that gives you the most joy?
Everything. But I will say the best part for me is meeting our residents and talking to them. Obviously, I'm running the organization and it's not always easy for me to do. But boy, when I get the opportunities, it just really validates everything I do and all the hard, long hours I put in and the difficult community meetings. They share all kinds of things with me, all kinds of stories. I mean, I could go on for days about stories, but most of them just have to do with people whose lives are really being changed. And people get into nonprofit work. That's what we want to do, right? We want to create positive impact. And when somebody says, you have changed my life and you've given me an opportunity to raise my kids in Santa Monica and go to great schools and give them a chance to improve their lives. I mean, you hear that once, you're probably good for a year's worth of challenges. It's really heartwarming, and it's really what gets me up in the morning.
I love it. So good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you, Tara?
Yes, well, you can visit our website, which is communitycorp.org, and you'll see all kinds of information about us. We're also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all the good places.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been awesome. I'm so excited about the work that you're doing, and keep it up. So great.
Thanks, Matt. Great talking to you.
You too. Yes, my friends, we have come to the end of this amazing episode of Nonprofit Connect with Matt Barnes. You made it! Thank you so much for listening this far. And if you'd like to hear more from Nonprofit Connect, brought to you by Rogue Creatives, make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you don't miss out. We don't care which one. It doesn't really matter. Just listen. Just subscribe. Just make it come right into your podholes every week so you can hear what's going on. Also, if you're interested in working with us or want to reach out and tell us how amazing we are, learn more, whatever it is, you can visit our website, npconnect.roguecreatives.com. Or just go to roguecreatives.com and you can find the rest. Okay, that's pretty much it. Okay, bye-bye. Nonprofit Connect with Matt Barnes is hosted and executive produced by me, Matt Barnes, with an assist by my chaos coordinator, Tiffany Pope. Production is by our amazing friends over at Fame, the B2B podcast agency, along with Belinda Carter-Thompson and the team here at Rogue Creatives. Production lead is Luke Audi at Fame. Writing is by Sam Hollis at Fame and Matt Barnes and Taylor Bolanos from Rogue Creatives. Nemanja Koljaja of Fame is our audio editor, and Arslan Yakub from Fame is our video editor. Creative direction is by Corey Hill of Rogue. Our artwork is designed by Hope O'Kelly and Joshua Marino at Rogue, and Ian Salas of Fame. Theme music is composed and performed by Jared Atherton of Chapters. Luke Audi of Fame does our booking and our guest relations. Huge thanks to our amazing guest for joining us for this episode, and to all of you incredible listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, and I don't know why you wouldn't have, don't forget to help us spread some good by giving us a good review. Preferably, 5 stars with lots of words saying how amazing we are on whatever platform you're listening on. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is. Also, tell your friends and subscribe so we can come straight into your podholes each and every time we have a new episode. For more information about Nonprofit Connect, or to join us at a live event here in Orange County, California, visit our website, npconnect.roguecreatives.com. We'll catch you next time. This has been a Rogue Creatives production.